I am very happy to join this marvelous family with the commitment to seeing that there is justice for every child and for the poor. So thank you for adopting me. I'm grateful. We have been blessed to live at an incredibly magical moment. We have experienced the beginning of both a new century and millennium. How are we going to say thanks for the life and earth and nation and children that God has entrusted to our care? What legacies and values will we stand for and send to the future through our children to their children, and to a spiritually confused, balkanized, and violent world desperately hungering for moral leadership and community? How are we going to measure progress over the next 10, 100, and 1,000 years if we survive them? By the kill power and number of weapons of destruction we can produce, or by our willingness to shrink, indeed destroy, the global prison of violence constructed in the name of peace and security? Will our era be remembered by how many material things we can manufacture, advertise, sell, and consume, or by our rediscovery of more lasting, non-material measures of success? A new Dow Jones for the quality of life and justice in our families, national and world communities. Will our legacy be how rapidly technology and corporate merger mania and greed can render human beings obsolete? Or by our efforts to reach a better balance between corporate profits and corporate caring for families and communities and the environment, and our governments caring with just policies for all? God did not make two classes of children, and we do so at our peril. It will determine our future. Will we be remembered by how much a very few at the top can get at the expense of the many at the bottom and in the middle, or by our determination to close the huge gap between the haves and have-nots in a world where the world's richest 1% control more wealth than the rest of the world combined, and when the world's 8 wealthiest people, all billionaires, own as much wealth as the bottom half of the world's population? Now, I wouldn't deny anybody their first, 5th, or 10th million or billion. If there are no hungry children, if there are no homeless children, every one of God's children should have the basic survival needs that we have. Something is awry in our own nation when the richest 1% of us own more of the nation's wealth than the bottom 90%. When the 400 highest income taxpayers earned as much as the combined tax revenue of 22 states in the District of Columbia in the most recent data, and when the highest paid American CEO took home over $94 million in 2016, more than the combined average annual salaries of 4,240 child care workers. We've got to get our children ready for school, and we're going to give all of our children a healthy start and a head start. This is going to determine the future of America more than any other factor, how much we are investing in building strong, educated children. Our greatest threat does not come from the outside, it comes from our failure to build healthy, educated, safe children. So I feel so blessed to have the work I have, and we cannot tolerate a growing income gap between rich and poor that has reached historic proportions, not seen since the 1920s. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German Protestant theologian who died opposing Hitler's Holocaust, said the test of the morality of a society is how it treats its children. We permit our children to be killed by guns every 2 hours and 48 minutes. We have lost more than 180,000 children to gunfire in America since 1963. Between 1963 and 2016, 65,947 black children and teens have been killed by guns. This is more than 16 times the recorded lynchings of black people of all ages in the 74 years from 1877 to 1950. And I think that we are seeing that you can't limit injustice, and you're seeing these school shootings, and their bullets have no race. And we've seen whites and blacks and browns. All of us are at risk with the pervasive gun violence that we must stop. Children should not be killed by guns in the United States of America. These facts are not acts of God. There are choices as human beings, as people in America, and we can and must change them. Albert Camus, speaking at a Dominican monastery in 1948, said that perhaps we cannot prevent this world from being a world in which children are tortured, but we can reduce the number of tortured children. And he described our responsibility as human beings, if not to reduce evil, at least not to add to it, and to refuse to consent to conditions which torture innocence. I continue, he said, to struggle against this universe in which children suffer and die. And so must every one of us, because only then will the voices and the cries of the prophets for justice and peace become a lasting reality. This is the 50th anniversary of Robert Kennedy's, who suggested the idea, and I was just a midwife to Dr. King, of the Poor People's Campaign. And we need to honor them by finishing the work that they began. We should not have children as our poorest age group in America, in the richest nation on earth. And it is our Achilles heel, both economically and politically and morally. And we're accountable for every one of these children. And in this year, I hope you will join us in focusing on ending child poverty. It will save us money. It costs us $500 billion every year. Bob Solow, our Nobel laureate at MIT, estimated in a study for us in school dropouts and wasted productivity and health costs, and in this cradle-to-prison pipeline. States are spending on average twice per prisoner than per public school pupil. I can't think of a dumber investment policy. We need to break up the cradle-to-prison pipeline. We know how to end child poverty. We have done a recent study which is being updated and will be circulating to you, and I hope you'll all help, that we can lay out 9 policies, and housing turns out to be the biggest struggle that people are struggling with right now, but where we could reduce the poverty of all children by over 70% and black children by 72%. And we can really make a dent in lifting the floor for all children living in poverty. We're going to be coming out with this report, I hope, if the researchers will finally finish it, within the next 30 to 60 days. It is wrong to let our children be the poorest age group. We have 13.2 million children living in poverty in this nation, 6 million in extreme poverty. That's more than all the citizens of this great state of Pennsylvania. We can do better than that, and we must do better than that. But we've also got to stop the poverty of violence and the killing of our children. And we must stand up and insist that our children be safe in their schools and their communities. The killing of children must stop. And I just hope that we will raise our voices and say no more. And we can make a difference by making sure that the gifts of those of us who are able to sit in this kind of ceremony, and I'm sure that this is the best graduating class that LaSalle has ever produced, and that everybody is really proud of you, that you will go out and raise a ruckus to make sure that there will be no poverty for children, and that the children that are coming up behind you will one day be able to sit where you are. And because I'm a woman, and I want to just say, I think we all have to chip in, but I think that there's a special role for those of us who are women, and for those of us who are people of faith. My daddy and mama always said, my dad was a Baptist minister, just follow the need. And if you just follow the need, you'll never lack for a purpose in life that's worth living for. And they also taught us as children that you don't ask when you see a problem, why doesn't somebody else do something? Ask why you don't do something. And we sure didn't like cooking and cleaning for the old folks' home that they started, and I didn't like having a foster child in my bed when I woke up the next morning. But they always said, do what needs to be done, and service is the rent that we pay for living. And so I feel so blessed to have been born with a family of faith, but who translated that faith into making sure that justice was a part of the priority. And I just want to end with our sense, because everybody thinks everything is so hard these days, and it is hard. But I just want to say my theory of change comes from two ladies that I wear around my neck every day, Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. And Harriet Tubman, as you know, when she was born a slave, but she began to get herself free, but she remembered when she got herself free that she had to come back and help other people become free. And she boasted that she never lost a passenger on her Underground Railroad. I don't know any airline or bus company that has that kind of record. And she knew it wasn't just about herself. And we've all got to understand that we're part of community, and we've got to come together to build that movement for our children to be safe and to have enough to eat and a place to sleep, because there's no place to hide in the face of this pervasive injustice right now. And the other is Sojourner Truth, who was a brilliant but apparently illiterate slave woman, but she was absolutely unrelenting in opposing slavery and in getting her child back from slavery and in trying to make sure that women had equal rights. And my favorite Sojourner theory came from a speech she made one day when she was threatened by a prominent white man that said if she came in here, he didn't believe anymore in her old stuff than for an old flea bite. And she snapped back at him and said, that's all right, you may not like my talk, but you may not think that an old flea bite anything, but I'm gonna keep you scratching. Many of us like to be very big dogs, and we get overwhelmed by very big problems like ending poverty, like ending the gun violence that we should not have in this nation. We don't need to be big dogs, we need to be faithful, strategic, persistent fleas. Enough fleas biting strategically can move the biggest dogs. And I just hope on this 50th anniversary of Dr. King's and Robert Kennedy's sacrifice that we're going to pick up where they left, and we're going to create an America that is safe and loving and just for every child, and that every poor child, every disabled child, every child who may be perceived as different but are all sacred will be able to sit where you are sitting. And I just congratulate all the graduates, because I'm sure you are the best graduating class in the history of this university. Godspeed to you.